after the loss of Channel 23 and went on to work for the mayor of Akron as his communications director. It was there Williamson got an outside perspective on what happened to Channel 23 and what it really meant for the city of Akron.
Editorially, we did a pretty good job of getting out and covering the things that really matter to people. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't sexy, it wasn't, there was no flash at all in our news, but content was good.
And Akron's mayor says he wants the people in the city he grew up in to be able to make those decisions by having all of the information. Don Pasqualic is in his 20th year as mayor and has made national headlines with his thoughts on local government. He thought opening a dialogue on the communication problem and other issues in the city would help Akron grow. Pasqualic commissioned a report called Imagine Akron 2025. The report looked at the city's future and how Akron could realize its full potential. One of the key components to the Akron 2025 plan is having adequate news coverage in Akron.
There's a role that the media has to play to inform all of us, to keep us aware of what's going on, and it is frustrating. Our radio listenership is just diffused. I mean, it's split probably 16 different ways. Not one of them has probably more than 7% or 8% maybe of the market. So if there really was an important message to get out, you know, you just cross your fingers and hope that the Akron Beacon-Journal writes the story accurately.
Pasqualic thinks having a television news outlet is important to a city Akron's size. It's a way to communicate what's going on in the community, and without it, there's a huge void. Yes, there's always been the Akron Beacon-Journal, but the mayor didn't think that was enough. In the 5 years that there was no television news in Akron, Pasqualic had to get creative and come up with alternative ways to reach the people.
What we started to do was print up 4 times a year a nice magazine that gives people information about the city, highlights city workers, and then tells a story along the way of different parts of city government so people learn about what their city government's doing and then updates them periodically on events coming up. And it was a way to really to react to that complaint that people felt like they just didn't know that something was going on.
Your defense of the war
Pasqualic has held public meetings with business leaders and news executives to figure out how to keep the Akron cable newscast on the air. And so far, that has been successful. But no one knows how long the cable operation will last.
We, the city, have invested money in that facility to try to make that happen. We're not listed as sponsors. We've chosen not to, you know, sort of stay in the background so that we are not out there looking like we're buying the news. But I think it's important to have a third party outside of City Hall providing that kind of news for people.
Right now, the city's one newspaper, the Akron Beacon-Journal, is the only form of local news coverage that is a sure thing in the city. But even that news tradition is on shaky ground at the moment. In August 2006, the Beacon-Journal laid off 40 employees and promised to cut more jobs in all of its departments, citing a decline in revenue. The cuts included 29 full-time employees and left the newsroom with 120 workers. The job cuts came after longtime owner of the paper, Narrated, sold the Beacon-Journal in June 2006 for $165 million to Sound Publishing Holdings. Mayor Pasqualic says when there's no television news station in a city the size of Akron, it's hard for city leaders like himself to get his vision and message out to the people. It's also hard to get a positive image of Akron out because the closest television news stations in Cleveland only seem to come to Akron to cover the unusual stories, the gruesome stories, or the negative ones.
I usually say when the Cleveland folks are down here, especially a few years ago when we had 23 on a regular basis and they had more, I said, something bad must have happened because Channel 19's here. That's still pretty much the case.
Congressman Tim Ryan says the free exchange of information and ideas is important to a city the size of Akron and agrees Akron has a big problem, but it's one he's not sure how to solve.
It seems like really the people of Akron who depend on Cleveland media get their news that is basically Cleveland focused on just about everything because, of course, Cleveland's a big city in its own right. So I think Akron really does kind of get left out as far as the citizens of knowing what's going on federally that affects them locally, and from the state perspective too locally.
Ryan says recent events nationally and the situation in Akron showcases why media is important and why television deregulation did not work.
We need to get more media, we need more people asking more questions of not only the president but of all of us to keep us honest. I mean, that just needs to happen. So I hope some of the actions over the past few years with the war, with kind of some of the rights going on in the courts and other things, limiting the rights, including the First Amendment, I think hopefully will signal a pivot in the other direction.
Meanwhile, the one news operation that is on the air in Akron is trying hard to survive.
I think we do a very good job of giving people the highlights and the resources. I mean, I wish we had, 2 more reporters, 2 more photographers. I wish we had an hour newscast. Because this is a big area.
Mansfield says even though the mayor and other politicians and city officials see the need for an Akron-centered newscast, community support is not as easy to come by. There could be a number of reasons for that, but Mansfield says the fact that Akron is part of the Cleveland television market sticks out above the rest, and he doesn't see Akron becoming its own market anytime soon.
I don't think the Cleveland market's ever going to let that happen, because that would suddenly make their stations that much smaller. But if you look at the relationship of Cincinnati and Dayton, as an example, right here in Ohio, they're both one county apart, just like Akron and Cleveland are apart. A little farther for the cities, but not much. 50 miles, I think, down there, about 35 miles up here. They support 2 markets down there. People who live in between get both. They watch Dayton and Cincinnati. Cincinnati covers some news from Dayton. Dayton comes from some news from Cincinnati. I think we could do that, but it's just so financially challenging to step up. And there's so much money in the Cleveland market, being, I think, the 15th largest market in the country, because Akron's part of it. I don't think the TV gods are going to let that happen anytime soon. But there's enough good business here. There's enough good people here. We certainly see cities this size and smaller that thrive with 3 and 4 TV stations across the country.
Mansfield and his fellow journalists at the new Akron-based news think their news product can work for the city of Akron.
Enough city leaders have stepped forward saying, what do we need to do to keep the news on the air? And enough business leaders have done the same thing, because it's all part of the identity of the community. People see Akron as a big community because of a lot of things. They got a pro sports team downtown now. The big stadiums brought a lot of things to downtown. We've got a major newspaper here in town. We've got, a downtown area. We've got a few 100,000 people. All those things work together for the synergy of a city. And a news identity is part of that.
Even though this station has the monetary backing of one of the larger stations in Cleveland, it still faces some of the same problems and issues that faced WAKC from its beginning in the early 1950s until the day news ended in 1996.
Fortunately, I work for a general manager who says, look, we don't really care if we make money. We want to at least break even. And if the city and the community can come together with enough advertising to keep us on the air, we'll keep doing it and then see how we can expand. So things have stabilized, but there's never a lot of stability in broadcasting. But for now, we feel pretty good.
The original Akron TV station felt pretty good in the beginning, too, but 2 decisions were made in the 1950s and 60s that led to the downfall of WAKC's effort to establish a successful television news product in Akron. The first was the unfortunate luck of the station to have applied for a television license right before the infamous FCC television freeze. This delayed the station getting on the air and being able to compete fairly with other television stations that were already established in the area. It also put the station in a dreadful situation because when the freeze was lifted and the FCC had decided how to eliminate the television frequency congestion, it had decided that the Akron station would have to be placed on a lower reception UHF signal. When the Federal Communications Commission issued television licenses, it was supposed to do so when considering several reasons. Broadcast licenses were supposed to be renewed if the station meets the public interest, convenience, or necessity, but that wasn't taken into consideration when it came to Akron and several other stations that were placed on UHF frequencies.
The FCC still talks about consumers living in markets. It doesn't talk about citizens living in communities. And if the television allocation process was really to serve the public interest, they should be talking about citizens living in communities. They shouldn't be talking about consumers living in markets.
The second decision that stopped the station's eventual success was made by Arbitron in the 1960s. When the rating service developed its area of dominant influence television market setup, it created a situation that WAKR would never be able to overcome. Placing Akron and Canton into the Cleveland television market was a decision which Arbitron officials said was based on what stations people in Akron watched more frequently. Now, Cleveland stations are established as the place Akron viewers go to watch local news. And the current version of Akron News is trying to battle against that, but it's hard.
Such a large city to have not had its own newscast for any length of time, it's really an anomaly in the TV news business, but it's so close to Cleveland, it's part of the Cleveland market.
But Cleveland is far from the minds of people at the Barberton Labor Day Parade. The people of the Akron area realize how important it is to honor their local labor force and the manufacturing workforce that grew this area of Northeast Ohio into the rubber capital of the world.
These are the men that built this country. You go around here, you'll see a lot of veterans, a lot of veterans. Our memorial's on the other side of the lake. It's full. A lot of people died from this town. A lot of people fought for this country from this town, from this whole area as far as that goes. Akron the same way, because Barberton used to be a strong labor town and a mean labor town. They could get pretty violent around here.
Labor is a large part of our country's history. Barberton is a large labor place. It was bigger. We've lost so much industry, and I think that happens in a lot of towns, but Barberton has really been hard hit.
Akron's mayor says that the manufacturing and labor history is going to be a big part of the area's future, with the possibility of building a new high-altitude ship in Akron, a story that Akron's new newscast has been covering.
We see a resurgence now because of the high-altitude possibilities with new technologies that have been developed not at Goodyear Aerospace, but at the facility that Goodyear Aerospace once owned, the air dock, that's now owned by Lockheed Martin. And the development of that high-tech industry centered on this same basic concept that you fill a balloon with certain type of gas and it will be lighter than air and it will go up. In this case, an unmanned to the level of about 62,000 feet, so that nothing short of an anti-ballistic missile can get it.
And the mayor hopes the new Akron newscast can learn lessons from the past to make TV news work in Akron once and for all.
This helps give us an identity. They want to flip on and say, here's what's going on in my town tonight. I don't want to see what's going on in Lorraine. I don't want to see what's going on in Ashtabula. I want to see what's going on here. And that's important for jobs, it's important for communities.
But officials say what the people of Akron, Barberton, and surrounding communities fail to realize is what could have happened here if there was a strong local television station. Some studies link social and civic participation to a strong local television station in the area. And if there were 1, 2, or even 3 of those, who knows what could have happened here. But the people of this area will probably never understand that. And unless something dramatically changes here, the next several Labor Day parades in Barberton probably won't have many television journalists to honor.
On Frontline, 4 confessions to rape and murder.
He got me to confess.
4 men.
I broke and told them whatever they wanted to hear.
The confessions.
Forget the truth. Forget justice.
Watch Frontline.
Join us tonight at 10.
For lawns, vegetables, and flowers, anywhere you want good things to grow, Milorganite has been making slow-release, non-burning, organic nitrogen fertilizer since 1926. Milorganite, for better results naturally.
Hi, I'm Mark Wahlberg. Join me on our search for America's hidden treasures.
I'm stunned that I actually have a real Sungay mask in the roadshow.
Really? Yeah. Shows how much I know.
Next time from San Antonio, Texas, on Antiques Roadshow.
Be sure to watch Thursday night at 9. Serving Youngstown, Akron, and you. You're watching Western Reserve PBS, a service of Western Reserve Public Media. Local funding for Frontline is provided by the members of Western Reserve PBS and by
Wayside Furniture, offering complete design service in addition to 200,000 square feet of mid to high-end furniture for over 70 years.